Today's episode of SBJ I Factor is sponsored by Pepsi. I'm Abe Madcore with Sports Business Journal. Today on SBJ I Factor, we speak to a 40 under 40 recipient from 2015. Paraag Marathe is president of 49ers Enterprises and executive vice president of football operations for the team. Paraag, great to see you. You were 40 under 40 in 2015. I went back and read that story. You were 38 at the time. You were president of the 49ers at that time. I think you're now entering your 20th or 21st year with the organization. And so let's talk to the viewers. I think you're California native. I believe your parents, immigrants of India, had pizza restaurants in the state. I think you went, right. I know you went to Berkeley and then Stanford Business School. Yep. But we got a lot to cover. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me about your youth and how did that influence and guide your path?
My youth, well, you mentioned pizza restaurants. My youth was pizza, sports, and more pizza. It's funny, my parents got into the pizza business and owned a Round Table Pizza and then later Mountain Knights Pizza. Started when I was 11 years old. And, I actually had two different childhoods. My first childhood was my dad was an electrical engineer, standard Indian immigrant. My mom was at home and we had the white picket fence type upbringing of just everything, the American dream type childhood. At 11, it shifted to my dad actually had both jobs, the pizza restaurant and he was an engineer for a little bit. And we had the pizza restaurant and that took all of my parents' time and that took them away. So then my sister and I became latchkey kids at that time. And after about a year, I was like, all right, well, I want to get into this business and start it. So I started working at the pizza restaurant when I was 12. That continued all the way until I was 21, 22, until I finished Berkeley, actually. And I ran the pizza restaurant when I was 12, 13 years old. I couldn't see over the cash register. I was hiring and firing employees and basically running a big pizza business, big for us.
Right.
And, I would eat pizza 7 meals a week. And if I wasn't working at the pizza restaurant, I was playing sports. And it was just one of the two. That was my whole. That was all of my formative years and all of my teenage years was pizza and sports.
Restaurant work, working for your parents, what did it teach you?
Boy, taught me leadership, taught me accountability. Also the deep sense of responsibility and loyalty, I guess you could say. My big thing was when I first got into it, it was not long after I started where I kind of had a rule with my parents where if I was working and managing the restaurant, they had to be home. One was because I couldn't actually be there when they were there. And two, because I did it so that they didn't have to always work at the restaurant. Right. So I would always go after school, work the 5 to 9 shift. I'm not even sure I was legal then. But that's just what I did. And so it was just a deep sense of obligation, loyalty, responsibility.
Love it. And so everyone I talked to said this guy is the biggest sports nut, was always a huge sports nut. Did you think that you would work in the sports business when you got older?
I actually wanted to be a pro athlete. Grew up playing mostly baseball. I played baseball, basketball, soccer. And I always dreamed of being a pro baseball player. Unfortunately, I capped out at 5'9" and $150. And so my dreams were squashed even when I got to Cal, actually. But I just devoured everything. I love, back in the day when you open up the newspaper, you see the stat sheet of the baseball box scores. I would just study all those stats and watch look at the leaderboards of every sport. I was just so into that. It was actually when I got to college and I watched Jerry Maguire with Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. It was actually, believe it or not, my first realization that there was this whole other business beyond just being a coach and a player. The business side of it, being an agent, being a negotiator, being a GM, being a team president, all of that stuff. It hadn't dawned on me that these are big businesses. And obviously they're exponentially bigger today than they were 20 years ago. But that was my first sense. And at that time I thought I wanted to be an agent. And so that was my career goal and passion at that time.
And then how did Berkeley and Stanford change that thinking? Because after Stanford, I believe you were at Bain & Company, correct?
Yeah, I was. So I actually wanted to be an agent all through college. Okay. I applied for an internship to IMG when they didn't even have an internship because I wanted to be an agent. I wanted to follow some of at that time, they were the biggest sports agency in the world. mostly focused in tennis and golf, but they had all the agents. So I sent resumes to every big sports agency, including, I remember Lee Steinberg is a Cal grad, and I sent like a million letters and phone calls to Lee. Never called me back, never wrote me back. We've talked about it since, but so that one didn't work out. But I got an IMG. I actually worked for, who was my first sports mentor, and Steve Zen, who was at IMG and now at the Pac-12.
Yep.
And he hired me, and for 3 years, sophomore, junior, senior year, I worked at IMG as an intern. I took the BART over from Berkeley to San Francisco. It was more on corporate representation, so not it was more like when Cadillac wanted to sponsor Tiger Woods. I was working with Cadillac, and then I loved that. I thought I wanted to do that. And then after I finished, I went to Bain. Actually, Bain was right after Berkeley, and because of my sports background, I was the sports guy. So anytime Bain had a sports client, I was the kid on the team that was put on the project, and so we had a long relationship with Nike. And so any Nike project I was working on. So I spent a lot of time in Beaverton and up in Oregon working on various Nike projects. And then twist of fate, Bill Walsh and Terry Donahue called Bain because they had a 2-month project wanting to study the 2001 draft, the value of draft picks, not the players, but like the exchange rate when you're making trades. And sure enough, at that time, I was like the Bain analyst that had all of the sports experience. So they put me on that project. It was like a 2-month project on the 01 draft. And here I am sitting in a room. I'm 23 years old. And I grew up a stone's throw from the 49ers facility. And like my heroes were, Bill Walsh and Steve Mariucci, the head coach, and Terry Donahue and John McVay. And like I'm sitting here as the kid, I'm just like soaking it all in. And that was really the beginning of my football career.
That's an amazing story. So a couple of takeaways there. One, you were working at IMG while you were still going to school. It sounds like 35 to 40 hours a week in addition to school. Yeah. So that was incredible work ethic, incredible time management. And then to be there at that young age and really probably analyzing the draft slot and draft values, correct?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So just looking at that and looking at, what physical measurements or athletic characteristics or predictors of performance by position. Then I started getting into salary cap research and helping John McVay with contract negotiations. And it just sort of grew from there. I actually grew up on the football side of the business and then evolved into the business side in addition to the football side, which doesn't usually happen. But that's just the way I grew up. And in fact, when I went to business school at Stanford, I did the same deal. Like sports, as you know, Abe, sports is really, to get in, it's much more about who you know than what you know. At least historically, it's how it's been. And I knew that if I left, I wasn't going to get that same opportunity that I had. And Stanford didn't have a part-time program or anything. So I ended up doing full-time school, full-time work for my MBA as well, probably working 45, 50 hours a week at the Niners because I just didn't want to give it up. I didn't want to leave what I had. But I also wanted to at least get that degree and see where that degree took me to.
That's amazing because I will tell you that in your early days, so you started there in, like we said, 2001, I believe. And I remember being in the early days and hearing about your name and people having a little bit of, there was some, not bewilderment, but not mystery about what you were doing and all the different roles you were playing. And, totally. were you ever frustrated by kind of the mystery around what Paraag was doing? Because even in the media, specifically local San Francisco media, your reputation was pretty interesting, to say the least.
I was like the mystery man. People thought that I wore a pocket protector. I worked in a windowless office typing away on my on my multiple screen computer or something. It was an interesting time. I'll tell you what, it was probably one of my bigger learnings in sports earlier in my career. And it wasn't a fast learning. It took me a little while, and that is tune out the noise, right? As to just focus on what you think is right, and making sure that you're adding value and the people that you're working for believe you're adding value, and then just keep plugging away. And the rest is noise.
And obviously you had the trust of the York family, worked very closely with them across the enterprise, across the organization. Did you ever have to reinvent yourself or your skill set over these last 2 decades?
It's funny you say that. I would say that I probably had to reinvent myself 3 times or invent myself 3 times. First was to prove that I knew football. The second was to prove that I knew business. And the third was to prove that I knew how to be an investor and grow grow what what 49ers Enterprises is. So in the beginning with football, like I didn't play high school or college football. I don't have a dad who played college or high school or NFL football, right? So I was a total outsider. I don't look the part, right? Sports is not super diverse in terms of like multicultural diverse, right? And so, of course, the assumption was, how could I possibly know anything about football? How could I get involved in contract negotiations, salary cap, all of that stuff, helping with personnel? And just that took time. It took years of chipping away to prove to multiple people that I knew what I was talking about, right? And then when we post business school and I transitioned over into doing a lot more on the business side as well, as we were trying to get Levi Stadium built. Same thing. I had to prove that I knew business at that time, right? And I had to prove that I could hire a team as we grew from 75 to 300 people, hire a great executive team to help us get Levi Stadium built. Then we opened Levi's and we host Super Bowl 50. And after Super Bowl 50, we sort of formed 49ers Enterprises, which is our sort of catch-all organization for everything that we do, whether it's investing in companies, whether it's buying into other sports properties like Leeds United, whether it's incubating businesses like Elevate or Venue Next. And I had to prove that we knew how to be, and I knew how to be an investor and build organizations. And so, yeah, I feel like there's been three checkpoints in my career where I felt like I had to prove myself.
I do want to talk about 49ers Enterprises, and probably right now is a good time since you mentioned it, because I think you've quietly developed one of the more influential forces or companies in the industry, and not just for what you've invested in, and I would say your broad view of the industry, but also strong talent like Moon, Sean, Colin, I've heard a lot about, and you have partnerships with a lot of interesting people, and you're monetizing sports across verticals. So for the viewers and the listeners who aren't sure what 49ers Enterprises is, how would you describe it, and what's the mission?
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. It simply put is, if I were to describe it in one sentence, is we wanted to transform the 49ers from being a billion-dollar lemonade stand of an NFL team to being a multi-billion-dollar sports and entertainment company. And we had all of these great things going for us. We are in geographically in Silicon Valley, a place where innovation, it is an innovation hub. We had that innovative mindset in how we thought about going about building Levi Stadium and building our organization. We have one of the most powerful brands in the world, not just in the NFL, but across sports, right? We're a very recognizable brand. And then, frankly, we had a deep bench of talent. We have so many smart people. One thing that I'm particularly proud of is the people that we've hired and brought to the organization. And a real competitive advantage that I feel like we've had is that I said sports is about who you know, not what you know. I kind of did it upside down, where historically sports people hire other sports people. They look at, do you have a prior sports background as a first criteria? And then, do you happen to have a good business experience and smarts and all of that? I just did it upside down. I just said, let me first say, do you have the business chops and intelligence for the job? And then second, do you happen to have worked in sports? And so we ended up getting all these great people that maybe otherwise wouldn't have gotten chances in sports, and with great backgrounds that span not just sports, but across venture capital, private equity, investment banking, consulting. So we have this great group of people. And so we're able to do a whole lot more. And that's where with 49ers Enterprises, it's probably across four verticals. We formed our own baby venture capital fund where we invest in companies. And frankly, that started because when we sold Levi Stadium, whether it was Al, myself, or Jed, it was all these VCs on Sandhill that bought the suites. And it started out, they just threw us a bone. Hey, as you know, every investor wants to be in sports and every sports person wants to be an investor. Yeah. Like, hey, we're investing in this company. Why don't you guys come along for the ride? We'd love to say the 49ers were in it. We didn't know squat about the company. We said, yeah, sure, we'll throw you a bone. Here you go. And, 50, 60, 70 deals later, that's turned out pretty well for us. And so that's how it started. Then we decided we incubated businesses. Venue Next was really the first one, where we said, all right, we could build a sports technology platform, a SaaS-based platform around, the in-venue experience. And that in-venue transferred to not just have to be sports stadiums, but it could be airports and amusement parks and things like that. Then third is we do consulting. So, in one of my night jobs, I'm chairman of USA Cricket, and
Right.
we're building a T20 cricket league in the US here in 2022. And 49ers Enterprises are helping build that organization and get that off the ground, and how we build a league and 6 stadiums around the country and all of that we're getting going. And then finally is investing in other sports properties. Leeds United is probably the most high profile one, but there'll be others coming fairly soon. And it's all around. We've got the people, we've got the brand, we've got the mindset of wanting to do more and build. Of course, we keep the core, which is the 49ers that we want to maintain. But we got such a great group of people who are hungry to do more, and that's really what 49ers Enterprises is all about.
How much time do you spend on Leeds United? Because I know you're on the board there.
Yeah, so we just picked up a much bigger chunk in January, and I became vice chairman of the club. So since then I probably spent a lot more time just kind of, just having been promoted to the Premier League. There's a lot, we essentially quadrupled in revenue, and so we have to, now that comes with a lot more expenses as well, and players, and show that we belong. Like, the first step is to show that we could stay in the Premier League. We did that this year, and now is that, how do we have the talent to matriculate up the table and show that we can contend for Europa and eventually Champions League. And so I don't know what I don't know, so I'm not trying to do everything, but I'm just learning. I'm trying to learn. But the most important thing is we're not arm's length owners. We're not like viewing it as buying a piece of land or an apartment building in the UK and just watching it appreciate. Like, we want to be involved. We want to help them grow, because really where I see Leeds United today is really similar to where I saw the 49ers 15, 20 years ago. The 49ers like a big storied franchise playing in an old stadium, really, and the team itself was struggling on the field, and we're trying to turn the 49ers around, and that's kind of where I see Leeds today.
So many ways I could go with that. Let me ask this. I know I talked to a couple people who said, like, their investment in Leeds is not passive. They're up at 3, 4 in the morning to watch these matches. They're texting each other like crazy. Also, like, I read or saw an interview with you on one of their website where you really spoke of the power of the community of Leeds and how it almost feels like so uniform, so one, that it really struck me in terms of the culture about that organization.
Yeah, it is next level there, where calling someone a fan or a supporter of their Premier League club is a disservice. It is part of them. It is part of the fabric of their being, where it's their club, it's their family, it's their children, it's their job, and probably the last one to go, if something had to go, was the club. You're born into it. I was telling somebody yesterday, it's an interesting thing that doesn't happen here in American sport, where you're born into being a supporter of Arsenal or Liverpool or Leeds or Man U, whatever it is, and then you even have a sports career where you become a sporting director or a chief executive of one of those clubs. But it's totally okay and expected that you're still a supporter. Like, you might be the chief executive of Man U, but you happen to be a supporter of Liverpool because that's how you grew up, and that's okay, because they know it's part of the fabric of who you are. It's like part of your family. That doesn't apply here, right? Like, here we're fans, and here when you switch teams, like, you switch allegiances, you have to. You don't do that.
Put on your crystal ball at work, Paraag. Who's more valuable in 10 years, the 49ers or Leeds?
Great question. I think NFL is king, right? I really do think that especially this COVID year, you saw with the other sports, whether it's their viewership or things like that were declining, where the NFL just stayed so powerful. But of course, if you ask me a question of who has the chance to ramp faster in 10 years, who's going to have the highest growth rate, I think Leeds really is sky's the limit.
Well, I don't want to dwell on this, but I do have to ask, in terms of the recent Super League, I saw one great quote by you where you said, who called them the Big Six? Themselves? Obviously, that move didn't sit very well with you personally.
Well, it's almost because, like, it goes against the essence of English football, right? Part of what makes it special. When I said it's a family member, it's like it's whether it's Leeds or whatever your club is, it's like a little brother or a little sister, one that like you can pick on and make fun of within the family, but outside the family, you're protecting them and supporting them and doing everything you can. And you want to see that, you want to see them succeed, then you're going to commiserate with them when they don't succeed. And part of that is the whole pyramid of English football, whether you go up or down. Like you, and that struggle when you get relegated, like we did for almost 20 years, and then you get promoted, you don't appreciate the reward if you haven't gone through the struggle, right? And the Big Six is that's a static point in time. Today, these are the Big Six clubs. Who knows 10 years from now, 50 years from now, if that's going to be the case. In fact, 30 years ago, we were a Big Six club. We were a Big Four club, Leeds was, and then obviously we fell in hard times and different things. But in the 70s and again in the late 90s, we were one of the top clubs in all of Europe, right? And so if the Super League came about back then, we would have placed ourselves in it and been in it in perpetuity. But that's just not what English football is about and what makes it special. That struggle is what makes it special.
That's it, the ebbs and flows. So I want to move on to some quicker hitter type questions about you. So let's get into management style and leadership style. How has it changed? What's it like?
I would say my management leadership style is really open, honest, and direct. I don't like to harbor anything. I don't like to leave anything unsaid. And so, I deliver, I communicate that way, and I love that people who communicate with me that way. I think I hit on this earlier. One big thing for me is I don't necessarily look for people who have a specific experience in whatever area we're hiring for. I just want someone who's smart enough to figure it out. And if they happen to have that specific experience, then great. But that's not the prerequisite. The prerequisite for me is, are they resourceful, proactive, smart enough, entrepreneurial, where I just know they're going to figure it out. They're going to succeed or they're going to die trying. That's really what I look for. Honestly, and especially with if I'm looking for something specific or we're hiring for a specific position, I spend very little time talking about the nuances of that specific position, much more so about bigger picture, leadership, accountability, vision, things like that. I mean, it's funny, when we did our head coach and GM interviews 5 years ago, every head coach, the way that head coach interviews have been done since the beginning of time is everyone brings in their big binder and they go through their training camp schedule and they go through how they do this, how they do that. And Jed and I kind of just said, all right, let's put that binder aside and let's just talk to you, Kyle, about what your leadership style is, what's your vision, how do you hold yourself accountable? What's some of the biggest mistakes you made in your life? Talk to us about your person. It was all around that because we figured you get to the point of being qualified enough for the interview of whatever job that we're interviewing for. You already checked that box that you have the skill set to do the job. Now let's figure out what differentiates you, right? You have the necessary skill set, but let's figure out what makes you special. What are the things that you do better than anyone else in the world or your peers? And how do you harness that? And are you aware of the things that you're just not as good at relative to your peers? And I'm, like I said earlier, it's one thing I'm really proud of is I'm always trying to find people that are more talented than I am, people that are more capable and smarter than I am to do the jobs. And, two guys I think of that I'm very proud to have hired that I take great pride in with Al Guido and Ethan Casson, who are presidents and COOs of their respective clubs. And sky's the limit still for both of them. They're doing great. And it's because just like the type of people that we're looking for. And we feel pretty good about how we built our team.
Yeah, I'm very good hires, and you have a very deep bench. Let's move to negotiations because you've negotiated contracts for players, coaches. Yep. You've negotiated business deals, development deals, team deals. How do you handle tough negotiations, and how do you handle when negotiations are going poorly?
So I teach a class at the GSB at Stanford on negotiations, and I always close with just kind of trying to paint a picture. The biggest thing that I always preach, at least in my class, is that it's not about ultimately what you get. It's about how you feel about what you get. Really, negotiations shouldn't be taught in business school. It should also be taught in psychology because it's all about human psychology. Because whether it's ego, vanity, insecurity, personality, place in an organization, all that stuff matters. And how you feel about what you get and how the other party feels is just as important as what you actually get. And so it requires a deep sense of empathy, understanding what the other side is, what their pressures are, what they're feeling, how they're feeling about it, how they might react to certain things. I spend 90% of my time preparing for the negotiation, and within that, all around, less about what I want and what I'm looking for, and more about, what is important to them. What are the sort of the hot buttons for them? What are the things that that they are empowered to make decisions on, and how can I give them what they need to feel good about a deal? And it's kind of like a movie set. Is how I look at it. Before every negotiation, I think about to myself, all right, what role am I going to play? Am I going to be the protagonist? Am I going to be the antagonist? Am I going to be the good cop, the bad cop? And am I going to say that I have to go to my owner on every decision, or am I going to act like I'm the one who can make the call? Then I think about, all right, is this going to be a comedy? Is this going to be a drama? Is this going to be a suspense thriller? And I just kind of paint it like that, where it's just like a Hollywood set and it's a play, and we're enacting this play, because ultimately it just comes down to feelings and emotions and the psychology of everything. And so having that mindset has really helped me. And then, especially then when you get into difficult negotiations, you can check in and check out of that set, right? So like I always, and it's not just an act, it's because I actually want to get more context and understand the person I'm talking to. I'd rather just say, all right, put a pin in whatever deal, crazy, acrimonious negotiations that's happening, and let's talk about your life. Like, hey, what's going on with you? What do you do? Like, how are you handling COVID? What are your kids like? And just hang out with them. To just give context that for all of us, there's always something much more important that we have going on in our life than whatever acute deal we have right in front of us.
That's a pretty interesting way of changing the tenor and the tone. I got a couple others that we'll finish up on.
Sure.
If you knew then what you know now, what would you do differently?
That's a really important one for me that I'm happy that I love to talk about, because it's a relatively recent epiphany for me, probably only 5-6 years new in my 20-year career here in the NFL. And that is that I wish I could go back and tell 2015 Paraag at the 40 under 40 words to just chill out and recognize that your job and your career is just what you do. It's not who you are. Like everyone, especially in sports, because of the way sports is such an insular world, and people want to protect and keep their jobs, and you're just focused on your career ladder and what title you have and how you're recognized for this and that. And I also was just trying to chase all those things and get all those notches and look to achieve. And it became, I defined myself. I defined my happiness. I defined my being by my job and my, what I was doing at work, not by who I was. And who I am is defined by who I love, who loves me, who I like to spend time with, what I like to do, my family, my friends, my kids. That's all the stuff that matters. The other part is just what you do. It's just what we do to keep everything else about who we are, that to keep that enriched. And I wish I could tell old Paraag that, because it's really more like I would have been more present. I think I wasn't present earlier in the who part of my life, because I was so focused on the what I'm doing part of my life that I just wasn't I wasn't present. And I regret that. I feel like I missed out on a decade of personal life, Paraag, because of that.
What caused you to have that epiphany?
A few things. My sister passed away from a mental illness that she had, and that really kind of threw me for a tailspin. And it took me a while. It took me a few years for me to actually even be present about it. And so that was one thing. And then honestly, it was. I'll just share. We're getting close and personal here. I was in a marriage I never should have been in. We were more friends, and I got married because I thought, when I talk about notches, it was just something like, oh, okay, hey, as an executive, I should probably be married. It wouldn't look good if I wasn't married. And we never had any kids or anything, but it was just I wasn't happy. And really, I wanted to marry my college sweetheart, who was the first love of my life when I was 18 years old. And I didn't. And then in 2014, that changed, and I realized that, and I got divorced, and I did end up shortly after marrying my college sweetheart, and we have two young girls, and they're my world now. And it made me realize that, part of my language, but none of the other shit matters. It's really just what we do. What matters is the time I get to spend with my family, and what my kids think of me, and making sure that I'm enriching the lives, not just my family, but enriching the lives of other young executives or other young aspiring sports people that don't think they have a chance to get into sports, and helping the people and paying it forward to people that I got a chance because Bill Walsh called Bain, and I was lucky, and I want to be lucky, or make someone else's luck a handful of other people's luck, and give them the chance that they think is not possible.
Well, that's well said. I do want to then transition that, because your point about young people. So my last question, Paraag, the advice that you give to young people who do want to get into the sports business, who do want to be the next Paraag Marathe, what do you tell them their path should be?
First and foremost is, if you definitively know what path you want to go on, then don't settle. So, if you know you want to be in coaching, if you know you want to be in scouting, if you know you want to be a team president, like, pursue that path and don't veer off that path. And then if you know, you've got to have grit and patience, because this is a hard world. Sports is, even compensation wise, you either get paid nothing or you get paid very well, and there's not a whole lot of middle class, right? So you got to have the patience to be able to stick to it. When I did those 3 years at IMG, I got a stipend. It wasn't even like an hourly rate. I had enough barely to cover my BART fare, and maybe a couple beers a week. And I did it for 3 years because I cared about what I was doing, not, what I was making. And I knew that I wanted, at that time, be a sports agent. And so I was just committed to it, right? And so that's one big thing is don't, if you know what you want to do, don't settle. And really, you got to just be seen. See and be seen. Like, you don't want to just come in and say, hey, look at me, my resume is awesome, I'm qualified to work in sports, so you should hire me. There are a lot of qualified people, right? So really be resourceful and proactive, and be a solver. Solve something. Come up with an idea of why you think running backs are undervalued, or why you think PSL programs, when you're building new stadiums, can be innovated upon, and come up with a new structure. It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong, but at least if you use that as the impetus and catalyst for instead of a resume, now people have an idea of how you think, and now people have an idea of, like, how your brain ticks, and it's a lot more compelling and impactful than just showing a resume that has a great GPA and great schools, and therefore you should hire that person. It's more effective.
I like those. And to your point earlier, it still is a little bit about a who you know business.
Yeah, it's a sad reality. It's true. Hollywood's the same way, I think, and I think we're becoming more of a meritocracy slowly, as franchise valuations have really exponentially grown in the last decade, and so people are realizing, well, wait a second, it's not just about the product on the field. I gotta turn this into a real business, because these are worth billions of dollars. Let me hire good business people. Frankly, for us at the 49ers, it's been a competitive advantage for us, because other people aren't necessarily looking at it that way and just trying to hire smart people. They've just been keeping the insular circle of hiring from within sports, and that's helped us. But I do think it's changing. It's becoming more of a meritocracy, which is great to see.
And real quick, as you look at the next 12, 24 months, I'm sure you're focused on the Niners, Leeds, deal flow, new technologies, investments. What am I missing?
Gosh, I think it's just more for us. It's more around how else can we grow? How else can we transition to being that multi-billion-dollar sports and entertainment business like that I talked about? Obviously, we don't want to veer too far off course, but we have the skill set and talent and people and geography to be able to do more. And I don't know what that is. I'm excited about what we're doing and helping with cricket, because I do think here we are, the second biggest sport in the world, and in the US being the largest media market in the world. And now there's all this talk about, with cricket potentially coming to the 2028 Olympic Games, the opportunity is perfect. The setting is perfect to have a new sport enter. I think you've seen lacrosse is doing a great job. There's other sports, especially as some of the more established sports are maybe starting to plateau a little bit. There's new sports, there's new things coming into play. And then finally, I think just the globalization. We are becoming one. The world is becoming one singular place. And so whether it's the globalization of the NFL or whether it's other, whether it's like things like the Premier League or other sports around the world becoming more prominent here in the US, I think we're just becoming one community versus hundreds of fractured communities like it was even just a decade ago. And I think, whatever we can do to capitalize on that one community is things you'll see us doing.
Great stuff. I can't wait to keep my eye on it. Paraag Marathe, you were a SBJ 40 under 40 honoree in 2015. It's great to see you still leading. Thanks for joining us today on SBJ I Factor. We'll be talking to you and seeing you in person down the road.
Thanks, Dave.
Friend.
Great to see you.
All right, my friend.
That was fun.
Thanks for joining SBJ I Factor today. Remember to subscribe to SBJ I Factor wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to our future episodes that will hit every 2 weeks.